Castlevania. Ladies and gentlemen, all my stake through the heart unicorns, I bring you today's gameplay feature on PEX Play, Castlevania, Lords of Shadow. From the 1980s hack and slash to action role playing with platforming and puzzles, the series has been alive and well with generally well received entries and praise from its fan base into the 90s and the noughties. With some exceptions, Judgment and my personal grievance, Harmony of Despair. Sour aftertaste. Ugh. I'm a fan of the Castlevania series, having played multiple titles over the years from as far back as Rondo of Blood and Symphony of the Night, both very different games in their own right. Konami came back with a huge PS3 outing with the self-contained reboot and the series in 2010 and 2013 for the PC. Although 2 DLC were released, this video will focus on the base game and plot. It's worth noting Hideo Kojima, infamous creator of the Metal Gear series, collaborated also on this title. The game received generally positive reviews, with the main emphasis on its new direction. Although some fans may have been disappointed in the game's direction from transitioning to 3D, the game's developers wanted to break away from making the same game again and again. And I feel that was needed, although 2D was more than fine for Castlevania. It stood its own test of time with 2D and its sprite models, of course, as well. A transition which, although I did feel was needed, even in stark contrast to my favourite game in the series, Symphony of the Night, which please remind me to follow up and create a video of that absolute masterpiece of a game. After this game, however, its sequel fared fairly poorly, with mixed reviews and a blow to the series, and well, it's remained quiet ever since, outside of a mobile title or two, but we won't talk about that here, shall we? What motivates a man to confront the challenges that most of us would run from, condemning him to solitude, exposing him to defeat and death? The answer is love, a force so powerful that all reason becomes blind to it. Being a reboot to the series, this game was not considered canon and forged its own story. However, there are Easter eggs and references to other games in the series. Be mindful that although I will not be discussing the game beat by beat, I will be homing in on certain aspects, such as the plot, gameplay, and the clips on screen will reveal spoilers. So if you do not like this, proceed with caution. We follow a tragic tale as the protagonist Gabriel Belmont seeking revenge against the murderer of his wife and seeking her resurrection by slaying the Lords of Shadow. Whoa, wait a minute. That's the same name as the title! Oh my god! With the Lords of Shadow calling the shots at the end of the days, with darkness reigning across the shattered land, the evil creatures wreak havoc upon the remaining survivors. As a member of the Brotherhood of Light, Gabriel takes it upon himself to defend the living with other holy knights such as Zobek, who also serves as the narrator for each mission in the game, voiced no other than Patrick Stewart. Oh my god, fan meltdown of a Gabriel will confront the tortured soul of his dead wife, Marie, whom is trapped in limbo, and she acts as a sort of spirit guide and guides her beloved to his destiny to save the world and quell the Lords of Shadow. To do this, he must travel the ravaged land and unite the heavens with the world again and gather pieces of an item known as the God Mask, which is told to have resurrecting capabilities. By fighting the Lords of Shadow, we hear who they really are and the consequences for if they were to fall. Reoccurring characters such as the Guardian Pan will also influence Gabriel's actions and even help transport him around the land. We also meet multiple short-lived characters, each standing out in their own right, some with tragic ends which Gabriel must contend with on his journey. The script itself has some really, really great moments, and moments I honestly did not see coming, far surpassing the storytelling to many of the previous games which generally focused on a single concept. The game has a lot of variety in the locales which you will explore throughout your journey, from forests to mountains, snowy regions, to underground caverns, villages and castles. This prevents the environments from becoming too repetitive and stale. However, there was a persistent problem I found from the opening of the game which prevented me from being immersed in the world Castlevania is set in. I'm not sure is it only me, but each area feels hollow, that there is something missing from gripping you. I will try to discover this as the video progresses, but I feel one of the main culprits, at least in my view, are the bland backdrops and lifeless wooden-like stage props to cage you in to every battle arena and neatly dressed corridor you pass through and battle through. This was most likely due to limitations on the hardware at the time to keep the game running smoothly. However, it still irked me. It also baffled me that despite what else was occurring on the screen, and I was button mashing or cleverly timing dodges and abilities, I kept having the feeling that everything felt the same. Even though the environments looked different or there were different monsters on the screen, it's just something I could not really seem to shake off throughout the approximately 20-hour adventure, spanning over 12 different chapters. Now, each of these chapters are split into multiple levels instead of one interconnected world like some previous outings. Each chapter varies with its length and can be divided into several smaller levels, or some chapters may have as little as 2 levels. Dissecting this further, some levels can be completed in as little as 5 minutes, with some larger levels taking over 20. Most levels focus on a single idea, such as getting from point A to B, or finding a certain object, or gaining access to some entry point. Sometimes levels feel like they abruptly end, and you're just sitting there being like, okay, was that it? Or, oh, okay, cool, it's over. Okay, huh. Some levels will feel exceptionally linear, running down some corridors every so often, meeting some set piece, battling around said set piece, and continuing forward. Other levels are more sprawling and offer decent platforming, and honestly, these levels are generally the standouts in the game, as the exploration and platforming can break up the sometimes monotonous combat. I'll delve into combat a little bit later. Swinging back to the approximate 20 hours of main story playtime, naturally, your playtime will be affected by replaying levels, exploration, and any side content. Some levels will entice you to replay them at a later stage, as you will have unlocked a new skill which you can use to then open up a new area. However, most of these new areas are usually just cul-de-sacs, where they simply house some power upgrade. But hey, who doesn't want an upgrade? I've enjoyed the exploration mechanic, which is a staple in the series. It's really that carrot on a stick moment when you see something shiny but just a little bit out of reach, or a section which is breakable but you're not powerful enough yet to just force your way through. It leaves your mind in a state of curiosity, so they have nailed the exploration aspect in many respects during the gameplay. I feared in the outset that the tutorial level would be how the game would continue to be throughout. A circular room where you just hack and slash various enemies time and time again, giving me some annoying callback to some sort of Harmony of Despair where it's just simply room after room, same thing after same thing, very boring, very bland. I just don't know how that game was ever made. Okay, I digress. It wasn't until the 3rd level that the levels start to open, which unfortunately just so happens to be a swamp-filled level with dull, slow, trudging movement to break up the flow. Adding more annoyance to this, you are supposed to wait for circles to disappear in the swamp or face a QTE. Now, I'm going to be using QTE a hell of a lot throughout this explanation of the game. Now, QTE, for people who are not quite familiar with the term, is quick time event, where you must button mash certain actions on your screen, a staple at the time of the PlayStation 3. It's rampant throughout this game, and I will talk more about QTEs extremely soon. Trust me, because they are annoying. Oh yes. where you risk being pulled under by grabbing hands and dying if you mistime the action. But even with this annoying beginning level to the game, it finally gives us branching paths. However, a feature the game also likes to include is that it likes to block you off regularly from going backwards, which hampers in the ability to allow the levels to feel more open. I get sometimes in adding a point of no return, but sometimes it feels like unwarranted and more of an annoyance to make you replay the game after completion in case you missed out on something. It's more annoying that this happens on occasion depending on what branch you take. One branch could lead you to an upgrade and the other then will push you towards the end of the level, which you'll just have to replay the level as a result just to go down that single path right at the end of the level. Another feature which will expand as the story continues is the ability to find magic gems, mostly off the beaten path, and using your eyes to notice these additional routes other than the routes the game tries to make you follow down. This is a staple in the 2D Castlevania games, and thankfully it's brought forward here. Speaking of magic gems, this feature will be further expanded on as you progress in power. By acquiring 5 of the same gem colour, it will reward you with either life or magic increase. After completing a level, the game will display your percentage progress for completion of that level, wherein it will also display any upgrades you may have missed out on. So you may feel the need to replay it at some point by collecting some of these items and then warping out of the level to continue the story. During my playthrough, I did find myself every so often replaying some levels as I really wanted that extra magic or life gem for my upgrade. It really can help as a buffer in the mid to late game where the combat challenge can rise quite a bit. Puzzles, whether they be physical or allude to a more brain teaser, are sprinkled throughout, with some levels using them as its primary feature. Some puzzles are very straightforward, where some others certainly can be a head scratcher. Puzzles also, funnily enough, can be skipped completely at a cost to not gaining the bonus experience points offered for first completion. So hey, why use your brain cells at all, eh? Castlevania. Each level will have its own trial attached to it upon replay, which will provide sometimes a trivial challenge or handicap upon that replay to a more painstakingly difficult challenge. These challenges are for those who just want to play for completion's sake or prove mastery over the game and are not needed to progress or tied to any power-ups, at least to my knowledge. To further increase the percentage completion, you will also need to complete each level at its highest difficulty, as the majority of the completion is tied to this basic factor. I did not feel the need to do this personally, but percentage completion has been longly associated with the Castlevania series and even has been tied to endings in the past, such as, once again, my favourite game in the series, Symphony of the Night, which please once again remind me ASAP to post a video covering this magnificent masterpiece. Combat primarily involves Gabriel's retractable chain whip known as the Combat Cross, which can be upgraded during the adventure. From the very beginning, we are introduced to the basic square and triangle combat loops, which you will be employing on every battle. The square button typically deals with direct damage to a single enemy, with the triangle dealing area damage and weaving these both together. But it's not all doom and gloom with button mashing. For that, you will gain experience points, which you can then spend on purchasing additional skills and combos to enhance the variety of how you press the square and triangle buttons. I believe there are at least 40 unlockables, even if the majority of tiny changes are straight up upgrades to damage of said ability. But to be fair, combat in most Castlevanias can be seen as quite simple in execution, but quite difficult to sometimes master. The developers obviously set out to not alienate fans of the franchise by keeping these staples intact, while also breaking new ground. This can come in the form of a combo sequence of buttons, holding a button for a set time before adding others to the sequence, using a power-up you obtain during your playthrough, and you can then use this in conjunction with your attack buttons. In the beginning stages, the combat will feel extremely repetitive, but it's not all button mashing to victory. You must employ blocking and dodging to your arsenal. Blocking at the right time can open an enemy up to a riposte. Generally shown as a glowing animation, must be dodged. As you unlock additional equipment, you can add additional flow to the combat structure. One big downside to combat is when attacking more fearsome elite enemies, you will need to use a QTE move to finish them off. This really began to irritate me as the game progressed. You can suddenly be fighting a pack of enemies, and then to break up the combat you unrealistically pause in the height of combat to perform some QTE as the other enemies just watch on as if you're surrounded in some force repelling shield. Whoever thought this was a good idea should have been fired. QTEs are a constant staple throughout the game, unfortunately. A very unwelcome addition, but hey, this is the PS3 era and QTEs were all the rage back then, and for the better, it died. Messing these up can set you back heavily in battle, whereby stunned enemies or even bosses can regain HP if you fail the stupid button pressing. I'm sure the developers sat in a conference room one day and said, "You know what this game could use on top of the button mashing? We can give them more button mashing. Done, sold, job done." QTEs don't induce tension. They just induce irritation, just like in my voice right now. Sometimes you can't sit back and relax a cutscene because the game has not met its quota for enough QTEs in the past couple of minutes, so you always must feel on edge, something which can make you feel drained if you try to play the game for a few hours at a time. Such BS moments can have you literally winning the battle to literally losing and having to start all over again because you didn't press something fast enough or at the right time. It's downright not needed in this game, and the game would be so much better without it. In addition to a prominent combat cross whip, we will earn secondary weapons which are another staple in the series, such as knives, holy water, fairies, and the all-powerful Dark Gem, which summons unspeakable horror. Horror to all those who await you. Hail the Dark Lord, for the Dark Lord seeketh and cometh. Oh my! I've travelled with Gabriel, maybe for a little bit too long. I must stave off those dark lingerings. Vampires, werewolves and ghouls are a long-time favourite to the series and are reoccurring throughout the franchise, and this game is no exception. However, this title does produce other enemies into the mix, such as trolls, giant spiders, goblins and miscreant little demons like Chupacabra, which steal your relics and you must play hide and seek with them. The changing creatures is welcome, along with platforming and pace-changing puzzles. These are key components to the original Castlevania titles, and when it all comes together, it's just beautiful. Pairing these together with the environment changes and large storytelling advancements should be a recipe for success, but I still feel something is holding the game back from true elevation. One fantastic addition, even though it involves QTE, to begin, is the ability to mount certain enemies and add their special attacks to clear out minions or solve environmental puzzles such as jumping over much larger gaps, scaling certain walls, pulling items to you, or breaking down doors. The game starts this introduction to this new mounted ability in a really abysmal way with the second level where you are riding a horse trying to escape monsters. I honestly thought that if this feature was to appear multiple times or even heavily during the game, I would have just quit right there and then. The beginning of the game really creates a disservice to the rest of the game, whether intentional or not. Another gripe with the game are its clunky camera angles. Sometimes the developers are opting to show you the spectacle of the landscape while sacrificing your navigation. The use of the shaky camera when you complete a lot of the QTEs sometimes can make you feel disorientated and miss it. Once again, developers, this is not satisfying. Never repeat this in any game, ever. Please. Some camera angle choices are highly questionable and definitely detract from the experience and make some fights or platforming very, well, clunky. It's the only choice word I could use for this. It's just downright clunky. It's an unfortunate letdown and often outshines the moments when it actually shines. Another large contention, although it thankfully only occurs 2 times in the game, are the over-the-top scripted boss events of the Titans, whereby you must follow an exact pattern and repeat said pattern. Titan bosses are an obvious inspiration from Shadow of the Colossus, whereby you must scale up these enormous creatures and dismantle them. These bosses are very unmemorable due to the step-by-step approach. Bugs will also occur if you get to a section too fast, or the boss will remain in a permanent loop until you correct your course again. You can probably run around both Titan bosses indefinitely by dodging their attacks, and they won't progress to their scripted sources until you are standing in the correct part of the room. This is not my idea of fun, and I found myself rolling my eyes more so than anything else, even with their hand grabs and forcing you back to the start if you don't stand on the correct spot that the game wanted you to. Although other bosses can rely on scripting, whereby they only progress after enacting certain abilities, they are nowhere near as scripted as these first 2 major bosses in the game. The developers acted like the camera angles do here, opting for the spectacle over what was optimal. I feel the composer captured the atmosphere amazingly with such standout tracks like The Hunting Path and Fray in the Forest, providing a thrilling chase experience with mixing in the pounding drums and horns to bring the thrill of the hunt to the gamer. The Enchanted Forest soundtrack is so full of hope and longing, it is honestly chillingly beautiful. The Ice Titan, although the encounter sucked, the soundtrack made up for it and worth every second in my eardrums. The Black Guardian and Carmella are 2 standout fear-inducing tracks and keep the exploding tension on the listener as they fight these bosses. Finally, the last battle, or it may be under the final confrontation depending where you listen to it, is a magnificent send-off encounter. Grace is what picks me up and lifts my wings high above and I fly. Grace always conquers. Be graceful in everything, in anger, in sadness, in joy, in kindness, in unkindness. Retain grace with you. Although this entry to the Castlevania franchise had its flaws, it nevertheless is a Castlevania game and a worthy addition at that. The game had so many welcome strides for the series and could reiterate them on future games if it so pleased. There were moments of lackluster and dullness only to then be uplifted by its stellar musical score. But by sticking to its core, which propelled Castlevania in the first place, that is, its exploration, platforming, and combat. There's a lot of replayability for those that want it. The game opened up at a good pace, even if the beginning was unremarkable for the most part. It introduced new mechanics and features steadily, topped by some shining boss battles with its woven story and characters. I'm sure Lords of Shadow will be among the top of the franchise for many a fan, but there will always be those die-hard 2D sprite lovers, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Thank you for watching, and remember to please like this video to help me with the algorithm on YouTube, and remember to subscribe to see more videos like this in the future. And until we meet again, my unicorn, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Take care until I see you again. It really can help as a buffer in the mid to later game where the combat rise. Oh my Jesus. 3, 2, 1.